Let's go to Alicia and talk about the courts a little bit more. Can state courts provide an avenue to stop gerrymandering? State courts, not federal courts?
Absolutely. And the Supreme Court was very clear in the Rucho decision that I was mentioning that, that applied to the federal courts and that did not foreclose state courts and state constitutions from providing more robust protections and, creating causes of action, claims that you could bring in state court. And in fact, we've seen state courts rule in partisan gerrymandering cases in Michigan, for example, or not Michigan, Pennsylvania, for example. The Supreme Court there struck down the congressional map as a partisan gerrymander. It led to an impeachment effort against the judges and now a bunch of other attacks on the court, but the court was, ruled in a very significant case. We also saw partisan gerrymanders struck down in North Carolina earlier, and this was actually a case that was cited by the Supreme Court in the Rucho case. Florida's Supreme Court had interpreted its state constitution. So state constitutions and state courts are a potentially very important remedy and will be increasingly important as, the federal courts have, that door has been closed, at least for now.
Okay. Now, you mentioned impeachment proceedings. I understand that there's been something called judicial gerrymandering. In my home state, Jim and I happen to have grown up in Pennsylvania, so we're particularly interested in what goes on in Pennsylvania. But what's happening in Pennsylvania and some other states in terms of this judicial gerrymandering?
Well, so there's a proposed constitutional amendment in Pennsylvania, similar to Virginia's system. To amend the Constitution in Pennsylvania, you need to pass it twice, so in two different sessions, and then it goes on the ballot. So it's passed once, and we're sort of watching it now to see what happens. But it's a measure that would move all of the appellate courts in Pennsylvania from statewide elections, which is how it works now, to districted elections. And it gives the legislature the power to draw those districts and to time the transition to districts in a way that effectively gives them the power to target individual judges in a way that would, make it impossible essentially for them to stay on the bench. So, it's a very concerning amendment. It's something that we see as a pretty direct assault on judicial independence, particularly because it was very much in response to not only this gerrymandering decision, but then more recently rulings in election cases in 2020 that really have put that court in the crosshairs. And so we've seen that in Pennsylvania. There have also been, there's a measure in Texas that was considered that would similarly have, there are a few different versions. One would have created an entirely new appellate court. Another would have similarly kind of redrawn districts in a way that would have functioned as a gerrymander. So there's a number of states where we're seeing a lot of attention by state legislatures on the structure of courts, how judges are selected in an effort to, essentially politicize those processes and, make it harder for judges to perform the jobs that they're supposed to perform.
Well, that's fascinating because as I recall, and Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in Virginia, judges are not elected, whereas Alicia, I think in the overwhelming majority of states, judges are elected, correct?
That's right. So there's 38 states where at the high court level, elections are at least part of the selection process. In 22 states, judges run in contested elections where, sort of similar to others, you have multiple candidates vying for a seat on the bench.